There's no games in the NBA tonight. So Tony East and I are going to talk about the Eastern Conference, about the MVP, which everyone will be totally rational and fair about. And, it's Monday. Let's talk about some misery. Who's had the most miserable season? This is Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. We're free and we're available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can watch the show. Get a look at our smiling faces and get our facial expressions as I try and muddle through another conversation about the MVP. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Check out prizepicks.com and use promo code NBA or go to the App Store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network and co-host of Locked On Nuggets. His name is Tony East. He's co-host of Locked On Pacers, who, boy, that team is weird. That's a weird team right now, and they're in a weird place. You can also find his work at Forbes, WTHR.com, WS Community News at WS Community News, and his Indiana Fever coverage for the next hoops, which I'll be checking out a lot because I love betting on the WNBA. I absolutely love betting on and watching the WNBA. Tony, we have an off night. The NCAA Championship is tonight as we record this on Monday. Famously, one of my biggest engagement tweets ever was someone asked me a couple of years ago, why are there no NBA games tonight on one of the Mondays of the national championship? And I simply replied, 2 groups of children are getting together to miss jumpers. So
yeah, it's been about 8 minutes of the title game as we're talking, and it is 13-12. So it appears that you are once again accurate in your assessment of how those games are going.
Love the college game. Love the college. They try so hard. That's what the family always says when they're like, "Oh, you like the NBA?" I just like college. They just try so hard.
Yeah, they don't try till the fourth quarter of the NBA. That's what my family always says. Okay, whatever.
Yeah. My response to the try hard thing is I always say, yeah, they have to try harder. They're not as good. That's what happens when things are easy. You don't try as hard. On today's show, we're going to talk about the Eastern Conference playoff race and the battles therein. We're going to talk about, in the second segment, the MVP and where the race stands going into the last 4 games of the regular season. And the final segment, we thought we'd lift up your spirits by making fun of some other teams, unless you're a fan of one of them. We're going to talk about who had the most miserable season this year of the teams that have already been eliminated from playoff contention. It's a misery Monday here on Locked On NBA on the Tuesday show. So that's how that works. Tony, let's go ahead and start here. The Eastern Conference continues to be a mess. We have a little bit of stratification. There's like a tiny smidge. The Heat's win versus the Raptors on Sunday dropped their magic number for the 1 seed to 2. So it seems very likely that the Miami Heat are going to wind up as the 1 seed. 2, 3, 4 are occupied by the Boston Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Philadelphia 76ers, who are all tied. Those 3 teams are going to wind up some combination of 2, 3, 4. It could be any order of them. There's a variety of tiebreakers that if you have any questions about it, feel free to hit me up on Twitter, and I'm happy to answer those questions about who wins what. Then you have the Raptors, who took the L versus the Heat in Kyle Lowry's return to Toronto. The Bulls actually have slid just above them into the 5th seed because of tiebreaker. So Bulls and Raptors tied for 5th and 6th. Cavs lost again to the Sixers in a real heartbreaker. They played pretty hard in that game Sunday, but couldn't get it done. So they're now 3 back. So I'll just go ahead and spoiler alert you. The Cavs are going to be the 7. They're not getting out of the play-in. They're stuck. That's where they are. Then, oh boy, Hawks at 37 losses, 38 losses for the Hornets and the Nets. The Nets are currently the 10th seed. And so there's a chance that the Nets get eliminated in 1 game. And there's a chance that they wind up knocking out the number 1 overall seed, the Heat. There's a whole bunch of things to try and figure out here. So I want to start with this question for you. If you're the Miami Heat and you're looking at the play-in scenarios, what are you hoping happens?
I think if you're the Heat, you're hoping that 7-8 is Cavs Hornets, I think. Because I think, the Cavs are probably 7, right? I agree with you there. There's a chance maybe they're not, but it's very likely they end up 7. So I think if you're the Heat, you just don't want the Nets, basically. So I guess they're likely to get out of 10, but to have the least odds to play them, you would want them to have the most difficult path, and I think that would be the Hawks, and then playing another game. So I think if you're the Heat, you would want the play-in to be Cavs 7, Hornets 8, Hawks 9, Nets 10. But I'd also understand them wanting the Nets to get to 7-8 so that they could be the 7 seed and then not play the Nets. So it's really tough if you're the Heat. You have to kind of game theory, like, okay, how have the Nets done? Do we want to tank these games? That kind of balance is really tough because who's going to want to play the Nets in the playoffs? I mean, they have to make it, but they have Kevin Durant in their team last time I checked. So I don't know how you kind of balance what seed you want.
The teams in that 2, 3, 4 bracket, I think, actually have maybe the best chances of winning the East. You got the Boston Celtics, who have been the best team in the league over the last 3 months. You've got the Milwaukee Bucks, the reigning champs, who in the last week knocked off the Nets and the Sixers, and Giannis has made a big MVP push. And obviously, like, when they're fully healthy, they're really good. They've lost once with their full complement of starters available, which is crazy. Luka, by the way, really impressive win on Sunday to beat that team. And then you got the Sixers, who, if you're shooting 800 free throws a game, you're in a pretty good spot. Sixers also, I will note, Tyrese Maxey, I think, shooting 47% from 3 since the All-Star break. Tobias Harris shooting 37% from 3. So he's actually gotten his shot back. That's been a big deal. Like, the Sixers, I go back and forth between the Sixers are really vulnerable and the Sixers are kind of sneaky underrated. So I'll ask you this. Of those 3 teams, Celtics, Bucks, Sixers, you have to pick one. You have to pick one. Overrated, underrated, properly rated of those 3 teams.
Underrated Milwaukee for me, for sure. I think as long as, their big 3 when they play together, still a ridiculously good record. Giannis is unbelievable this year. They always step up and play well against these star teams in the regular season. When it matters, I think they are going to be really good. Properly rated, I'll take the Sixers here because I think James Harden and Joel Embiid are awesome. That said, I am very afraid of their playoff track record when ranking them here. Look, Boston has been, like you said, the best team in the NBA for 2 months, 3 months now. Pretty handily, too, by the way. Like, their defense is ridiculous. But a big part of their defense being ridiculous was Mr. Robert Williams, who's no longer a member of the team for the first round. I think they can get out of it, but it'll be a little more of a bloodbath. It'll be a little more streaky at that stage. I think they're my overrated team because there's been some studies that are like, your record over the full season matters more than your hot stretch near the end. And their hot stretch is pretty long to the point that maybe the studies are pointless. But I still feel like what they were. I was in the building for Pacers Celtics on January 12th of 2022. The Celtics were under 500 when that game tipped off, right? Like, they were not good for 40-something games. They could be awesome, and I could just be totally ignoring how amazing they've been since January. But they would be my overrated team of that 3.
I will go properly rated is the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they do get the respect that they deserve. They've just been really, really good. And their numbers with Brook Lopez. Lopez even hasn't shown as.
Yeah, I forgot you were talking about him, right?
Yeah, he's back, and some of the perimeter stuff doesn't look. This is the disturbing trend that I found with the Bucks. They are allowing the most 3-pointers made for 100 possessions in the league since All-Star break, and you saw it again this weekend versus the Mavs, and that's how the Nets got a lead on them, and that's how the Sixers got a lead on them last week. Like, the Bucks had to come back twice in those games where there were really impressive victories. Now, it says something that the Bucks were basically like, they trailed and gave up all these threes, and then basically Giannis was like, nope. But the 3-point thing, I think, is really concerning, especially if you run into, the right combination or the right team that can really hit you. Now, luckily for them, like, especially if they wind up in like the 3-6 and they're facing Toronto or Chicago. Toronto messes with Milwaukee, so I get nervous there. But like, Chicago can't keep pace. They just don't shoot enough threes. But as you go further, that's going to be the real challenge for them, is that the Bucks have really struggled defending the 3-point line. So I'll do properly rated for the Bucks. I will do overrated. I think you have to do the Celtics, just because like there is this idea of like, are the Celtics just going to run through everybody? And I'm kind of like, Robert Williams out several weeks. Celtics switch defense a lot. If you have a team that can actually attack that, and they're going to run into quite a few in the playoffs, that causes some problems. Like, they are lucky in that Al Horford is notably the best defender for Joel Embiid. Like that should be the counter is like, oh, you're going to switch everything? Well, we have Joel Embiid. So good luck putting a small on Joel Embiid, but they just play him straight up without Horford. That's going to be a big thing to watch though, is if the Sixers play the Celtics, can the Sixers use pick and roll to mess a little bit with Boston, given how they want to play that scheme, especially if Robert Williams isn't 100%. So I'll say I'm with you on Boston being overrated. I'll actually say the Sixers are a little underrated. I think, look, Harden's 2017 Spurs series remains like the most mystifying thing to me. Like they should have won that series. It was really crazy. Like I covered that series. I was in Houston covering that series, driving back and forth between San Antonio and Houston. And like watching them melt down in that series was really baffling. And so you've got that, you've got the Doc Rivers stuff, and then you've got Joel Embiid's history. He tends to struggle with double teams. But like, look, Tyrese Maxey, I think, is kind of like an X factor here that is a little bit underrated. And here's another one. The guy that is going to drive opposing fans absolutely insane, Tony, Niang. George Niang, I looked, his percentage is not good. But every time I turn around, he's hitting a big three. He's going to be the guy that hits like 3 3-pointers in a game 6. And the other team's fans are like, what is happening? I can already see it now.
Yeah, that's Niang's thing, right? Former Pacer. So I know Niang at least a little bit well there. Yeah, he is the king of the timely shot. That's for sure. I agree with you that I think if I had to switch anything in mind, it would be Philly would be the underrated team. And look, I get that when the game slows down and the officiating changes a little bit in the playoffs, that might hurt their free throw thing a little bit. But I'm of the opinion that Joel Embiid's fouls, most of them are legitimate. Harden's are a little more grifty, but he can still, I think, do what he does in the playoffs and dominate and be efficient, basically automatically, right? And his defense is unbelievable. I think they have the pieces to be great. I think it could come down to like if Thibault is awful on offense the whole playoffs, like that's where they would get screwed. Or if Maxey's defense is a little, he's been a little bit better as a defender this year, but if he can't hit a groove in his first serious postseason, that kind of stuff will kind of be what shapes the Sixers to me this playoffs.
All right, let's say you got to take one of the remaining teams, not the Nets. You got to take Cavs, Bulls, Raptors, Hawks, Hornets, any of those teams to make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. If you have to take one, who are you taking?
I mean, the Hawks surprised everybody last year, right? I think I would knock on wood, I don't know the health perfectly. I think I'd take Cleveland because they, with Mobley, Allen, and Garland, were like good, really good. Even after Rubio got hurt, we're good. And LeVert hasn't clicked there, but he gets up for big games. It's his thing. Like he was good for the Pacers down the stretch last year. He was good in the playoffs for the Nets. I mean, that was the bubble. Everything was weird, but he was good then too. Like I think it could be the Cavs if they get healthy in time. That said, they have to get through the play-in, which is like coin flip 2 games basically, and they've been banged up, right? Who knows if they can hit the ground running at that time, but they play uniquely. Garland's amazing. They have 2 All-Stars. I think it would be them, but they would also have to get the right matchup, right? Like if they get the Sixers, I would give them no shot against Philly in a series. So it would be a matchup thing for them. And then Toronto's my other one just because they play just like, hey, we have 1,000,000 6'8" dudes who can guard everybody. Like that is a recipe to beat a lot of teams. So Toronto and Cleveland would be my 2, I think.
Yeah, I go with Toronto. I don't really understand it. I don't watch them and I'm ever like, oh man, they're so amazing. Like Pascal's really impressed me this year. His counter moves have been really good. They just make things happen, man. Like it's just voodoo. I do not understand it, but they hang and they win. Their record versus teams over 60% winning percentage is better than their winning percentage versus teams between 40 and 50. It's just berserk. They just make things happen. It's
they have 3 players shorter than 6'5". They're just huge. They just throw huge people at you for 48 minutes, and they are a nonstop try-harding team. And sometimes that can be a demise in the playoffs, but it's crazy.
Which is crazy because they also don't have a center. Like it's Precious Achua.
For taller players are like 6'9". Yeah.
I don't understand. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and we're going to talk about the MVP race. We'll get you set for where that's at going in the last week of the season. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On NBA. But first, I got to tell you about Prize Picks. Are you looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA? Then you got to try the award-winning app Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. We love it, and we know you will too. It's so easy to use. You got 2 to 5 players and over/under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. My favorite thing to do is I use like the pick and roll coverage. So if a team plays at the level, they're going to force the ball out of the ball handler's hands, usually to a guy that's running 4-on-3. So that guy's usually got to score or an opportunity to put up points. So I just wind up taking the assists on whoever the guard is in those matchups. Works like a charm. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. You get to use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. They offer any prop you can think of. Points scored, rebounds, even steals. Love me a good steals or blocks prop. PrizePicks allows mixed sport entries. So you can throw in other props from the other sports. And they don't just offer NBA. They've got options for college basketball, college football, NFL, MLB, soccer, MMA, and more. And for a limited time, PrizePicks has got an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point, but you got to use code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer to Locked On fans. Sign up today and use code NBA and get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. We're also brought to you by BetOnline, the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Tony, you were covering that Nuggets Pacers game. I definitely bet the Pacers live when they cut the lead to 20. I bet them on the money line and really thought that I was going to cash on that. I genuinely felt like I had an opportunity there, given that the Nuggets blew a 31-point lead in less than 2 quarters, but the Nuggets held on for the win. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA, thanks for making this part of your day and your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Make sure your second listen is Locked On Now. It's got nightly recaps of all the NBA games from our hosts of panel experts from around the league. Check it out, Locked On Now on YouTube and wherever you find podcasts. All right, second segment here with Tony East on an off day. This is so weird to not have games. Very odd. All right, Tony. The MVP race has already heated up, has heated up, is already out of a nice sizzling pace. Nikola Jokic, I believe you can consider to be the heavy favorite at this point. The books reflect that. The sports book, he's the odds-on favorite at BetOnline. He was a leader in the straw poll. He had a monster game in the win over the Lakers on Sunday, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I will ask you this. I have a path where I know Joel Embiid can win MVP, but I want to hear yours. What has to happen in the last week of the regular season for Joel Embiid to win his first MVP?
When is voting? Do you know the exact date that voting is due?
It is due Monday at 5 o'clock. The season ends Sunday, and voting is due Monday at 5 via online ballot to Ernst & Young.
I was going to big brain it and say the Nuggets fall into the play-in, and that could still be it, is Denver falling to a spot in the standings where they say, well, wait a minute, I don't know if I can give MVP to a guy that can't even get his team into a locked-in playoff spot. Is that what you were hinting at as the option, as a stumble from the Nuggets this week?
Yeah, so I did a mini straw poll before Bontemps did his. And of the 15 voters that I polled, I asked them, if the Nuggets wind up in the play-in, does that change your vote? And some of them were already votes for Jokic, and some of them weren't. But 10 of the 15 said, if the Nuggets are in the play-in, they will not vote Nikola Jokic for MVP. They cannot justify having the MVP come from a play-in team. Logically, this does kind of fall apart under any scrutiny. Like, I get it. I completely understand. Like, it's one of those things that doesn't make sense, but I get it. Where is there a real difference if it's one game, especially if there's only a 2-game gap between the Nuggets and the Sixers or the Bucks? Does that really matter? Does it really matter? Like, just because we invented the play-in tournament, if the play-in tournament hadn't been invented and it was just the 6th seed or the 7th seed, would he have won? All these types of things, I think, make it difficult to ascertain. But like, that to me is the path. Is the Sixers finish really strong and grab? I do think that they have to finish with a better record than the Bucks. And the Nuggets lose 2 of their final 3 and fall into the play-in. If that were to happen, I do think that there is a path for Joel Embiid to win MVP.
Yeah, I think the Bucks part is important here, because Giannis, if, like, let's say this week the Sixers do whatever and finish 4th, and the Bucks win all their games and they're 2nd, maybe it's possible that, especially because Giannis' surge recently is in even the lines, you'd know better about this than me, but has been somewhat significant to the point that maybe he could still win it. I think it would take a pretty seismic week from the Bucks, a pretty horrible week from Philly and or Denver. But yeah, I think that's the only way to. I mean, I I personally pick Giannis to win right now, even regardless of all the lines going on. But given what we know from, like you mentioned, the straw poll, the lines, Jokic has been amazing. Like, it sure seems like he's going to win, barring something like that happening, just because of how good he's been recently carrying that team.
I had a vote one glorious year at CBS Sports. I had a vote in 2017.
The hardest year to vote of my life was the year you had a vote.
It was so incredible, though. I swapped like 4 times in that final week, and I've done the same thing this week. Last Tuesday morning, I had Jokic. On Wednesday morning, I had Giannis. On Thursday morning, I had Jokic. On Friday morning, I had Giannis. On Saturday morning, I had Jokic. On Sunday morning, I had Giannis. On Monday morning, I have Jokic. I'm back to Jokic right now. I think it's razor thin. I will tell you, I would not be surprised if Giannis gets second. I actually think the books are underrating Giannis. I think he's gained a lot of steam. His performance in back-to-back games versus the Nets and the Sixers last week, when everyone was like, "Oh my, holy geez!" Like hitting the threes, game-winning blocks. Like he makes so many plays, especially when the Bucks had a better record. That I honestly think that may wind up deciding 2 versus 3 is who winds up with a better record between the Bucks and the Sixers. I seriously think they might decide. Not that it really matters, because it's not like anybody's gonna be like, "Hey, I finished second in MVP." They're just gonna be mad they didn't win.
The trouble this year is that all these teams are so close in record right now. Like, because for me, like, look, I'm a bad MVP discusser because I kind of hate all the stats that are thrown into it. Not like Nick Wright level. Like, I understand them and like them, but it's like on-off numbers I hate for MVP, because then you're either killing or propping up a guy because of his teammates. It's not his fault what his teammates are for anybody. So for me, it's just, who do I think is the best? Who do I think requires most game planning? Who makes his teammates the best? And that's just kind of your own thought. There's no numbers to it. And this year, sometimes the difference can be like, okay, Giannis's team is 60-22 versus the other 2 guys who went 48 wins. Like, okay, I can be like, yeah, Giannis, great. But this year, they're all so close, and the numbers that everybody loves are all kind of similar. I mean, Jokic is winning most of those stats, but the per game stats that people like are all pretty close. It's like, I have no idea, and I get why Jokic is the betting favorite and why he very rightly could win, but it's so close that I don't remember, outside of the year you had a vote, the last week mattering this much for MVP voting.
It's really wild. One thing I will say, I think Luka Doncic wins it next year. I'll go ahead and call that right now. I think Luka wins it next year. I think he comes into camp. I think he leaves Ibiza a few weeks earlier. I think he sobers up a few weeks earlier, comes into camp in a little bit better shape, and I think Luka Doncic wins it next year. I would love it if it was. I do want, however, I want a Sixers Mavericks fans Luka versus Embiid. That's what I just want to sit back and watch.
I would like the Nets to have this much stability next year. YouTube watchers can see it, because then I think Kevin Durant's got a really good shot next year too. I mean, he's had a really good year this year, but it doesn't matter because they're 10th and nothing has gone well for the Nets, and every story about them is not about how good he is.
And they're there because he missed so many games.
Right.
He was ahead when he got hurt. And I've said this consistently. As great as Jokic has been, as great as Embiid has been, as great as Giannis has been, KD doesn't get hurt, and I'm still voting. I'm still putting my imaginary vote for KD.
I would have to.
For him to do that coming off an Achilles injury, that's absurd.
Insane.
That's insane.
Absolutely insane.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back, and we're going to talk about what team has had the most miserable season of the teams that are eliminated or could be eliminated as early as Tuesday. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On NBA. First, I've got to tell you about our good friends at Rock Auto, because they are the absolute best. If you're looking for parts for your car or truck, you've got to check out rockauto.com. Your local parts store, they may have those parts, but you're going to pay 30%, 50%, sometimes 100% more. You're going to have to sit there at the counter and wait for the guy to ask you these questions. Is that an SL or an SX or an EX or a BX or whatever? Well, you're like, I don't know. It's the normal one. It's got 4 doors. I don't know. It's got all-wheel drive. You don't have to worry about any of that. You just go to rockauto.com. It's simple and easy, and you're going to get the parts that you need. Discreet, easy, fast. It's awesome. You get to save time and money. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer, and they've got everything you need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at Rock Auto. BetOnline.com. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Make your second listen our shows, Locked On Pacers and Locked On Nuggets, because why would you not want more Nuggets and Pacers content in your life, especially if you're in one of these big cities? Come see how it is out in flyover country in the NBA world. This is a very weird ad. It's supposed to be a Locked On NBA read that I always forget. So anyway, let's go ahead and get to our final segment. I thought about a lot of different options for our last segment. I was like, well, we could talk about some of the news coming out with Magic Johnson or these types of things. But Tony, I especially considering the team that you cover, I wanted to ask you this. Here are the teams that have been eliminated from playoff contention in the Eastern Conference as it stands right now on Monday. We actually know all of the play-in teams, and we know all of the teams that have been eliminated. The Orlando Magic, the Detroit Pistons, the Indiana Pacers, the Washington Wizards, and the New York Knicks. In the Western Conference, the Houston Rockets, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Portland Trail Blazers, who have put on an incredible tank job over the last 2 months. Bravo to them. Just minus 20 net rating since All-Star. Didn't think it was possible. They proved me wrong. The Sacramento Kings, and with a tragic number of 2, your Los Angeles Lakers. This has been a rough season. COVID messed with things early from about mid-November through about January 15th. We had major COVID interruptions, as did the rest of the world. P.S. Pay attention to the news, because there's a lot of signals that we're probably going to be having another little bit of about the NBA snuck in about 2 weeks ago. Hey, you should all go get your boosters now, players. Going to need you to go do. If you haven't gotten a booster, you should really go get it. Whenever the NBA starts making that kind of noise, I get nervous. Whenever they start making that kind of noise, just as a heads up. Obviously, it was a shortened off season. We've had a lot of injuries. A lot of things have gone sideways. So, Tony, I'll ask you this. Who has had the most miserable NBA season this year?
You know, I considered 3 teams here. So let me back up and say, the prompt you sent me was teams that have been eliminated, so I couldn't include the Lakers. I would have if...
We can include them. We can throw them in.
Then I had 4 teams I considered for the prompt. One is the team I covered, the Indiana Pacers. One is the New York Knicks. One is the Lakers, now that I can include them. And the last one, and what I settled on as my answer, the Portland Trail Blazers are the team that I think has had the most disappointing season. Even when Dame played, they went 12-17. And Dame was hurt and was not Dame, which has to be frightening for a franchise that's like, oh my God, we're praying we can rebuild around this guy next year. And they had a new coach, and things look not great right now. And they have to switch GMs mid-season. And look, maybe they got some good assets at the deadline. Maybe they come out of this awesome. They finally broke up the pairing that some of their fans have been clamoring for forever. But to go from a team that had, I don't know what you want to call it, second-round aspirations, I mean, more than just making the playoff level aspirations, to be this bad, to be praying that they can get top 5 lottery odds at this point in the season. I had trouble getting off of the Blazers as, to me, the most disappointing team compared to expectation this year.
I'll disagree. I think a couple of things. One, they got resolution by trading CJ McCollum. So they're no longer waiting, right? They're no longer like waiting for the big moves. Like, they made the big move. They traded not only CJ, but Cove and Norman Powell. By the way, Norman Powell might be back very soon for the Los Angeles Clippers, who are getting very close to fully operational Death Star status. So you got that. You got Anthony Simons' amazing explosion and like how prolific he was as a scorer, showing that he could really be, if nothing else, than a guy that is able to score at an elite level and can contribute to a high level offense. Maybe be, if you're able to upgrade on the wing, which I think the plan is Jeremy Grant. Like, I don't look at like Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, Yusuf Nurkic on a re-sign big deal. I don't look at that and go, ooh, look out, world.
Right.
But you know, I think there were some bright spots in there. And I think that ultimately, in a year in which Dame was hurt and finally rested and they kind of get a reset, the pressure is high for sure for them to turn this thing around. But it mostly is kind of like a mulligan year. Like, okay, things fell apart, time to reconfigure. But Dame was out the whole year, and that's a big reason why we couldn't compete. I want to talk about the Pacers for a minute.
Sure. Well, it's funny you just mentioned the mulligan year, and in my head I was like, oh, I would kind of apply that to what the Pacers are. But go ahead.
No, yeah, because like I think this is like an interesting question. Brogdon has the Achilles issue all year long. Miles Turner has
Foot.
I forget foot.
Foot. I got this.
That's right, because it was the fractured foot. That's right.
I've studied this list 100 times. I got this.
Yeah. I remember now because that was the whole thing is people really wanted to trade for him. And then all of a sudden I started hearing like, oh, we might have a fractured foot. We're backing off. TJ Warren misses the entire season. That was a big loss that nobody really talked about.
Yep. Levert missed a couple weeks. Duarte's missed a couple months. I could keep going, but it's not worth it. You get it.
Keep going. The big thing for me, I bet them after the first 2 weeks of the season, I bet them to make the playoffs.
Wow.
Because I got them at a big number. And I looked at their clutch numbers and was like, there is no way that this team is going to be this bad in the clutch all season. No team could be this bad in the clutch all year. That's not possible. That can't happen. How could that possibly happen? How could any team be this bad in the clutch? The Indiana Pacers, and I know you know this, Tony, so I apologize. 11-34 in games within 5 points in the final 5 minutes. Are you kidding me? That's rough. But then you look at the back half of the season, and yeah, the defense is trash for sure. But like, turn Demonis, who wanted out anyway, into Tyrese Halliburton, who's been really good. You found some stuff with like Olshaver said. You found some stuff with I think Isaiah Jackson. Like you found some stuff with some of these other guys, and theoretically, you have Turner, Brogdon, Warren coming back next season, and if nothing else, you have the option to trade them and maybe reconfigure for the future. What's the argument for them their season being most miserable?
Well, I'm just plugged into them, so obviously it feels like more misery every day here. This is not the Pacers' ethos, which is a little unfair to the other teams, but they have not done this since the 80s, like this level of bad. Yeah. That was a factor I considered for them, which is again unfair to other teams. That whatever. Yeah, trading a two-time All-Star is extremely painful and miserable for your team. You bet on the playoff thing. They had this 3-game win streak in early December that got them to 14-16, right? Looking like they're coming in hot, easy schedule after Christmas. COVID hits them at the worst possible time, right? Then Turner gets hurt. Then Duarte gets hurt. That's the fun young thing. Chris Duarte's hurt. Like, the Halliburton trade is the thing that saved their season from just being like depressing thing over and over again, basically. And he has been wonderfully good and made them extremely watchable, which that's why I didn't pick them. But everything that if you told me before the season, like they're only going to win 26 games, I'd have been like, okay, then some of these things have to happen. Trade Sabonis, Warren doesn't come back, Turner, something like I could have probably guessed all these things happening because that's how bad it's been. But I don't think it's the most miserable in the league.
The Lakers, I think, are pretty evident. Like we don't
both.
Like we don't really have to like go into the details, right?
Yeah.
And like the Knicks fans at least had like one good season last year. So honestly, I have to be like, yeah, is it disappointing? For sure. You lost Derrick Rose for the year.
The reason I'm way lower on the Knicks misery is like the reason that they're bad is they're now screwed because of it. Because they gave Julius Randle so much money. Yeah. It's like, whoa, boy. So maybe they can recover. They have good young players, but like, whoa, did their pivot from yay to oh no was so fast that is extremely miserable.
And the Lakers are miserable, and like that's been well documented. Yeah. They definitely go on this list. I have to say mine is the Kings. And
yeah.
My reason for the Kings is it's like the inverse of the Pacers. They didn't have that bad of injury luck. They were just bad. They weren't so bad that you could get excited about a draft pick. They're just kind of hanging there. They're unlikely to get a lotto pick. They're probably not going to get a franchise guy. They trade Marvin Bagley. They trade for Domantas Sabonis, but to get Sabonis, they trade Halliburton in a win now move, and they still don't make the play-in. And not only do they make the play-in, they were eliminated with a week to go. Like the Spurs, whose best player makes $15 million a year, are still in better position to make the play-in. The bar here was low. And the Kings couldn't get there, but yet the Kings couldn't get there so much so that they're in good position to get a great draft pick. Maybe the lottery gods will smile upon them finally. But this weekend, they secured the longest drought in the NBA in a playoff absence. They have not made the playoffs in the longest stretch in NBA history. That is depressing. Kings fans deserve better. They fought really hard to keep that team in town. And Vivek Ranadive, I think, absolutely deserves credit for being the guy to swoop in and save professional basketball in Sacramento. But good God, does that team need a total up and down reversal? They went for a win now move, could not win now. Still are going to face a lot of complicated questions about that later. Still have to figure out Fox. They didn't trade Harrison Barnes. Don't know what they're going to do for coach. The Kings are the worst because they're just in that middle. Like they're just bad, not spectacularly bad, not obviously tanking, not everybody got hurt like the Blazers and Pacers. They're just there. And that to me makes them, sadly, the most depressing team of the season.
I would like to congratulate the Wizards for being the only non-tanking team that I didn't even consider. Their season just kind of happened.
Yeah.
No misery, really fun start. Like they had some cool stuff going on. Every other team that wasn't tanking, we've mentioned in some capacity. So congratulations to my childhood favorite team, the Wizards, for not having a miserable season despite being bad.
Golf clap for you, Wiz.
Yeah, all right.
There we go. Good job. All right, that's going to wrap it up for Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Give us those 5-star reviews. Check us out on YouTube as well. You can follow Tony on Twitter at TEastNBA. He's a great follow. I've added him to my vital list, so I never miss a tweet from him, and follow his coverage of the Pacers. You can follow me on Twitter at HP Basketball. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On NBA.